Firstly, Ose, welcome to the DPDL Talent Development Podcast.
Thank you.
It's announced that Tottenham has signed with Kickstart, which is already such a big academy and big club in Bangalore.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in football for quite a long time now, just over 30 years.
Very excited about is understanding a bit more about the youth football ecosystems in England.
And trying to get the players to be the best they can be, so help them to reach their full potential. You know, as a young player, he was a good player. Definitely going to be ups and downs. They've got to really love it. They've got to enjoy it. That's a key one for me. I remember going back many years ago when Harry Kane was training, and we done some.
Firstly, Ose, welcome to the DPDL Talent Development Podcast.
Thank you.
Honor to have you on our show.
No, brilliant. No, they're happy to be here.
Great. It's been a couple of months, I think, now for you in Bangalore. Firstly, how are you liking the city? Have you settled in? What's the vibe like in Bangalore at the moment for you?
Answer to both questions, yes and yes. So absolutely loving the city. And have I settled in? Yeah, 100%. You can't not but settle in. The weather's beautiful. There's so much enthusiasm around football, which I love. I've been in football for a long time. So for me, I'm 100% settled in really well. And the city's very different from London, but amazing.
Fantastic. So Ose, just to give you a bit of background about our show, right? What is kind of the topic that we will be touching upon today?
Yeah.
We're a league which is attended mainly by parents, by lots of players, both youth and elite youth and grassroots. A lot of coaches are watching this show as well. So this is for this audience. I think talent development are the two key words that kind of tie everyone together. This audience. So firstly, what the audience would like to know is your background and your journey into football, because when it was announced that Tottenham has signed with Kickstart, which is already such a big academy and big club in Bangalore, and to be partnering with such a big club which is renowned globally, it raised quite a few eyebrows here in Bangalore and of course and in Indian football. So firstly, if you can take us through your journey in football before we touch upon how you came into Kickstart.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in football for quite a long time now, just over 30 years. And my main roles in football have been around player and coach development. And I started all those years ago in a very small club in East London called Leyton Orient, where I was a community manager and a football coach. And then from Leyton Orient, I was asked to work at Arsenal in their academy, which was slightly bigger than Leyton Orient, I'm sure you can imagine. And then from Arsenal, I went to work for Tottenham. That was my first stint at Tottenham within their academy. Worked with various age groups in their academy. Met some unbelievable coaches and worked with some fantastic players. And then from Tottenham, I was asked to be the academy manager at Watford, which in Watford's just outside of London. And I was heading up their academy there. And then from Watford, I was then in charge of the Brentford Academy. Brentford, again, they're in London, but in the west side of London, obviously in the Premier League now. So I was there for 6 years until they closed their academy. And then from Brentford, I went to work for Queen's Park Rangers as a youth team coach. And when I talk about youth team coach, I was just responsible then for 16, 17 and 18-year-old players. So it was the older age as opposed to the other clubs that I've worked at. I pretty much worked with all different age groups. And then from Queen's Park Rangers, I've done some work for a independent company. I was working there for 2 or 3 years. And whilst I was at this independent company, football-related company, I got a call from Tottenham to get involved with this project in India. And one thing I know about Tottenham, when they kind of partner with any club, they'll only partner with a club if they thought it was a club that is going to be exciting. It's going to be a club that they feel that they can actually partner with, because obviously Tottenham being a global brand, a big name. So straight away it excited me when I heard they were partnering with a club. I'd done my own homework about Kickstart, And then I got even more excited by what they've done, what they've achieved in such a short space of time. I think it was 8 years. They kind of seem to have gone from 0 to 60 in a real short space of time. And that really excited me, and here I am now today.
Fantastic. I think some of the key things I'm picking up is you've been a London man through and through. I mean, it's pretty much all clubs in and around London you've seen and lived
pretty much
football in the region there.
Yeah.
Just take us through that journey, Ose. Firstly, when you started off, what is it that excited you most about getting into youth football? Because I think that's you were a youth coach at Arsenal, you were an academy director at Brentford. What is it about youth football when compared to professional football that excites you, and why did you decide to kind of specialize in that niche?
I wouldn't say, I still don't think I'm a specialist. I'm still learning, and one thing about football, you're forever evolving, you're forever learning. But I've just enjoyed it. I've enjoyed seeing players develop. I've enjoyed seeing players reach their potential, and their potential might be playing in the World Cup, playing in the Premier League, or just playing local football and enjoying their football. So, there's a lot worse things you could be doing as a young person, whether that's male or female, than playing football. So, seeing players enjoy, keep themselves fit, keep themselves motivated, keep themselves from doing things that might not be as, socially kind of acceptable is, again, a big kind of reward for me. But yeah, it's the journey that I've been on. I've seen some amazing football players go on and play, at different levels of the game, and it's just kept me motivated, kept me encouraged, kept me excited. And yeah, it's just something that I've always enjoyed doing.
Got it. I think one of the key things that the viewers, would be very excited about is understanding a bit more about the youth football ecosystems in England. Right? When we say that, okay, you've been academy director there, or you've been let's say a youth coach for the very specific age categories over there as well. What does the role look like? For a coach who's aspiring to kind of be the same here in India. Yeah. If you can just tell us more about what the role of an academy director looked like for you when you were at Brentford. Yeah. What was your routine like?
So, I mean, the best part about working in football, there's no routine. Every day is different. You're working with people, so people are all unique in their own way. So every day is totally different. That makes it exciting. But in terms of the role, you can pretty much split it down into three things. It's about recruitment, it's about retention, and it's about development. So recruitment of the best players and staff. But if you talk about players, we talk about the best players. You're not talking about the best players currently. You're kind of having to look into a crystal ball. So you're talking about trying to recruit the best potential players, the players that you think in 5, 6, maybe even 10 years' time are going to be the best players who could then go on and play for your first team. So recruitment's the key in terms of the initial stage, trying to get the best potential players. Then it's really about retention. Can you retain those players? Can you keep those players? Because obviously the longer you can keep them, the better chances they'll have to adopt how you want them to play, how you want them to behave, how you want them to act. And then obviously, like I said, getting into the first team. And then lastly, it's about development. And development's all about the coaching, the training, the improving, and trying to get the players to be the best they can be. So help them to reach their full potential.
Okay. I mean, the 3 points that you've segmented over here, I think is each of those. I mean, we can dive into those so much deeper, right? Yeah. One of I mean, what I'm very intrigued about is some of the players that you've worked with, right? Andros Townsend, Jack Wilshere, the likes of players who've gone on to achieve big things in the Premier League, which is which is the biggest league in the world. Yeah. When you're working with talent like this, you mentioned that it's about recruiting players for the future. What is it that you're looking at? Because I'm sure you didn't identify a Jack Wilshere, and then you knew that, okay, he is going to become Jack Wilshere in 5 years. What was your recruitment process like, if to begin with?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think, especially at a young age, because a lot of those players, they come into academies at 7, 8, 9 years old. So who knows what they're going to be like when they get to 19, 20, 21. So it is difficult, it is challenging. I think what you're looking for at that young age is, number one, do they love football? When I mean love football, they've really got a passion for football, even at 7, 8, 9 years old. And as well as that, quite often they've also got some kind of outstanding quality. It might be a technical quality. Even at age, it could be a physical quality they can have. They could be quick or agility or whatever. So something that even sets them apart at a young age, 8, 9 years old. And you're looking at those kind of things. So yeah, it's difficult. I think what a lot of people do, and it's a mistake, is they kind of base their recruitment or their outlook on players on their past experiences. So they might have seen a player who looks like X, and then they think he's going to be X later on. But every player's an individual. So because he plays like him or looks like him, even physically, or it doesn't mean he's going to be that player in 8, 9, 10 years. So I think it's important that you do look at every player as an individual, and you kind of measure them and gauge them, and train them as individuals.
Got it. What's been it, when you're working with players, right? When you're working with players, I'm sure there are a lot of ups and downs in the player's career, of course, which would ultimately decide where he or she gets to. But then, as a coach, if you could just take us through some of the stories or some of the anecdotes of some of these big players that you worked with, what's been the best kind of qualities that you've identified and then worked upon it further? If you can just take us through some anecdotes of some of the players you've been with.
I mean, it's obviously worked with so many players. Some have gone on to make it, some of them haven't. But I think if you're looking at a key quality or key attributes that I see in most players that have gone on to make it, and it just goes back to that real love of the game, because as you said, there's definitely going to be ups and downs. It's not a smooth journey. They're going to hit hurdles, they're going to hit bumps in the road, and for them to overcome those hurdles, whether it be injury, whether it be loss of form, whatever it is, they've got to really love it, they've got to enjoy it. So that's a key one for me. They need that desire and that hunger to want to succeed as well. I remember going back many years ago when Harry Kane was training, and we done some kind of relay races, and Harry Kane, as a young player, he was a good player. He wasn't in the top of the actual group, and we just done some relay races. And I remember, there was maybe about 10 or 12 people running to a line, and he would have been in that race coming maybe 6th or 7th in that group. Most people who were first or second, they were really trying, and as they got to the line, they were kind of dipping over the line. Harry knew he couldn't win, and he was, like I said, he was maybe 5th or 6th, but he still carried on going like it was the most important thing in the world to him. Most of the other players who were towards the back of that group, once they knew they couldn't win, they just kind of half gave in. He carried on like he could still win the race, and just little things like that kind of stick in my mind. So as much as he had that real love of the game, he also had that desire to be successful for himself, and a lot of the top players are like that as well.
Got it. No, that's very interesting, especially hearing a bit more about a player that you see week in, week out on television. I think that's a nice story. So, Ose, when we talk about the football environment in the UK, right, where and I'm trying to connect this to India as well, because that's where most of our audiences come from.
Of course, yeah.
The environment in the UK has competition very, very heavily embedded in the culture, right? There are grassroots tournaments, there are leagues which the local football bodies organize. There's plenty of competition over there. So how do you as an academy director, as a youth coach, what was your process with regards to competition at the grassroots and youth level? How were you connecting your training sessions to competition, or was that important to you guys?
Yeah, it's quite different in academy system. So in academy system, which is like the top end of football in the UK, up until 16, they play matches, they play competition, but there's no leagues. There's they keep the score, but they don't record the score, if that makes sense. So you know what the score is, but you don't record it. So there is competition, but it isn't like it is in most European countries. Most European countries, even at under 9 or whatever else, they keep the score. There's a league table and so on and so forth. We don't do that, but we then would take our players maybe, at the clubs that I've worked at, whether it be Brentford or Queen's Park Rangers or wherever else, we would take our players for a tournament. So we won't play in a league as such, because we don't play in a league in academy football up until under 18, then it's a league, and under 21. But everything below that, you just play matches against other academies. The score, like I said, is recorded, but there's no kind of league table or whatever else. But to get that competition, or that, you call it a winning mentality or whatever else, you might periodically take your players to a tournament, whether that be abroad or domestically in the UK. But the majority of football that academy players play is not competitive in terms of league football.
Got it. Because when we started our journey here in India, the biggest problems that we faced was the lack of competition and the lack of competitive structures in Indian football. And I don't know how different this could be with the UK. Of course, it is quite different. But in India, we have a lot of football academies, a lot of coaches who are doing their own, things, maybe training 20-25 players in an apartment setting, or these are players who have finished their playing careers and now are just trying to transition into coaching, and they're doing something on the side. On the other hand, you do have good organized academies as well, the likes of Kickstart, the likes of Alchemy, the likes of BFC, who are also there. So what we noticed back then was there wasn't anything tying everyone together. And what we noticed that when there is a game to look forward to at the weekend, everyone who is now training during the week has something to look forward to, has something to connect that session to the game, and of course not from win at all costs kind of. I mean that also does tend to happen at the league, which is something we hope we can control. But that is something that came up. So is from that perspective, as an academy director, are you looking at whatever has been learned during the week? Is that actually being executed in a match? How do you measure that process?
Yeah, you measure it on match days, but you also measure it in the week. So even within your training sessions, you'll have most training sessions you end with some kind of small-sided game. So you could still measure the training or measure the competitive nature of your training in the training, if that makes sense. But yeah, on top of that, even though there's no kind of league format in the UK for academy football, it's still competitive. So you'll still play against another academy, just because there's not a league table. The games are still competitive, and 100%. It's a learning process. So they'll go and play against another academy, and what they've learned in the week or what they've learned during that month, they want to see if they can execute it at the weekend. So without a doubt, it's competitive, 100%, but it's not competitive to the point where they're going to give out league table rosters and cups and trophies and things like that and medals at the end of it. It's not that. It is more around player development. And like I said, a lot of clubs would then get their kind of extra kind of competitive football by playing in external tournaments.
Ose, when you got the call to come to India, Kickstart as an academy is one of the biggest academies in the city here of Bangalore. On the women's side, they are an Indian Women's League club, right? One of the top IWL clubs in the country as well. In terms of talent development over here in India, what excited you about the project, and what was your mindset like when you came in, that this is what I want to achieve over here? What was your mindset?
Yeah, I think, like I said, when I first got the call, I was excited because I know Tottenham partner with clubs that they feel have got, a similar kind of ethos to Tottenham, and obviously Tottenham being the club that it is, I knew it'd be something to definitely look into. When I looked into it deeper and closer, and I saw that Kickstart have only been going for 7-8 years, and what they've achieved in a really short space of time, it really did excite me. And then when I spoke to the guys, I spoke to Laxman and Shaker, and they were ambitious would be understatement. Really, really ambitious. Really, really excited about Kickstart, and that rubs off. It rubbed off on me without a doubt, and it was something that I was keen to. I've never done an international role like this. I've worked abroad many times, but I've never done like a long-term international role. And I've been offered quite a few, and this is one that really excited me. Like I said, having spoken to the guys at Kickstart and spoke to the guys at Tottenham, I thought this would be a really good project for me. And so far, it's massively lived up to my expectations. It's been absolutely amazing.
Nice. So I know it's been only 2 months. You're just into the new role.
Yeah.
But if you could take us through some of the differences that you are probably seeing, of course, between the UK environment and over here, it's quite different.
Yeah.
But in terms of players, in terms of your processes, has that changed in any way, or how are you looking at talent development at Kickstart today, being the man in charge?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it. The good thing is there's a lot of similarities, and the biggest similarity is the enthusiasm of the players and the coaches. They're totally excited about football, and I love the fact that they love football. And that's similar to the UK. It's like people in the UK. It's like a religion. Football is be all and end all, and I find that here as well. So there was a lot of similarities in that. The fact that it's residential is a big difference, but that gives an opportunity to, in some ways do different types of training, more training. So that's a plus point. The climate is a difference. So again, it's about adapting what you do. In England, there'll be certain ways we train which could be slightly different here because of the weather and whatever else. So there are differences, but for me, the key similarity is the most important one is the players love football, the coaches love football, they want to be better, and that's all you want as someone in my position. You just want to know that there's that real enthusiasm and hunger for the game, how you adapt the training sessions to fit, because what you can't do is say you're going to bring Tottenham to Kickstart, because it's different. I'm not saying it's better or worse, but we've looked at what they do at Kickstart, and my main role, working for the global department at Tottenham, is to develop players and to develop coaches. And how I do that is massively influenced by the academy at Tottenham. So we're influenced by the male and female academy at Tottenham. So our global team goes to various territories around the globe. And like I said, our main drive is to develop coaches and players. And for me specifically, because of the nature of the Kickstart and the amount of players they've got, my kind of primary objective is to really work with the coaches, because I couldn't get round all the players to have that real impact that I'd like to have. So my main objective is really to work with the coaches, upskill them, enhance their kind of learning, and hopefully they'll then pass that on to the players.
Correct. So when you took up this project, your fundamentals towards talent development, right? How do you look at talent development today? When you say that there is a lot of passion at Kickstart, there's a lot of players who love football.
Yeah.
Now, how do you take that passion? How do you take that love for the game and actually start developing them into players who go on to represent, let's say, the state teams and then go on to represent the national teams?
Yeah.
Do you have some sort of a target that's been given, or what's the fundamentals of talent development at Kickstart for developing players?
Okay, so I don't have any targets, but I have my own targets, which is to maximize the potential of the players. And for me, it's about individual development first and foremost. So how can we coach the players as individuals? But for us to do that, we have to know them as people first. So fundamentally, as much as I want to get the coaches to maximise the potential of the football players, for them to do that, they have to know the players as people first. Once they know them as people, they've got a better chance to motivate them. They've got a better chance to connect with them, and ultimately a better chance to teach them and improve them. So it is all about making sure we get that connection and not just look at them as football players, but look at them as individual people, and then we could then coach them as football players.
Correct. I think that's so important, right? Looking at them as people.
Yeah.
And I would say the same for the coaches as well, because your role, what I make of this is, it's you obviously cannot work directly with 100 players, right? But it's about working with each of these coaches.
Yeah.
How have you, let's say, what's your strategy towards developing the people and the coaches who are actually coaching these kids at Kickstart? Have you, how's your relationship with the coaches at Kickstart currently? Have you got a favorite yet?
No, I wouldn't say a favourite. I think I've got a good relationship with them, but maybe when you speak to them, they might say, "Oh God, I'm glad he's doing a podcast and he's not at a training ground." I don't know, but no, I feel we've got a good relationship, a really good relationship, and I think the key thing for me is I'm here to learn. Okay, so I think for you to be a good teacher, you need to enjoy learning, and I'm here to learn, and we've got some amazing teachers at Kickstart, and I call them teachers before I call them coaches, and they want to learn. And the good thing is they're open to learning. So, don't matter how good I may be as a coach developer, if the coaches don't want to learn, the teachers don't want to learn, I can't help them. Similar with a player. If a player doesn't want to learn, I can't teach them. And the good thing is the coaches at Kickstart, the teachers at Kickstart are really open to learning and learning, different ideas. And I'm not there to tell them what they're doing is right or wrong. Really, I'm just giving them a different way of doing things and maybe enhancing their development. Some of them have been coaching for 10 or 15 years. Some of them have been coaching for 2 or 3 years. So they're at different stages, similar to football players. They'll be at different stages of their development. And really my job is to just try and enhance their development and try and get them to a place where maybe they look at things from a different point of view. But ultimately it's about them helping the players, and that was my first message to the coaches. I'm here for the players, but I can't coach 200 players, so because of that I'm going to have to work with you, and I'm going to work with you as hard as I can to make sure we could help every individual player, every individual person who who's connected to Kickstart.
Got it. So Ose, we were talking about Kickstart and your strategy with the coaches.
Yeah.
So far, have you had any sort of a connection to the first team of Kickstart as well? Is there a plan, or is there a long-term plan or strategy to connect the academy to the first team and produce players for the first team? Is that something you're looking at?
Yeah, with Kickstart first. Yeah, I mean, even now, I think there's maybe four or five under 19s, under 21s who are in the squad, in the first team squad, and actually played or are playing. So yeah, without a doubt. I mean, I think the objective is to try and get players, through the system into the first team, and I think they'll do it. I mean, there's some really good players in the Kickstart system, and I think in time you'll see more of them actually come through and go and play in the Kickstart senior team.
Got it. So far, I think Kickstart has been the youth season has just kicked off, right? Mm-hmm. So there's the Karnataka Youth Premier League, KSFA, YPL that's going on. Have you been to the games yet? Have you seen what the under 9s and the under 11s look like at the moment?
Yeah, I've seen under 11s. I've seen under 13s, 15s. Yeah, I've pretty much seen all age groups and seen different games, and it's been good. Some exciting, lots of enthusiasm from the side, from parents and coaches, very animated, which is good. But yeah, it's been some good stuff.
I think that's one similarity that any country in the world will have. It's the passion that you see on a match day from the touchlines, from the parents.
Yeah. I mean, we do try and curb it in academy football. In academy football, the parents are a lot more reserved, and that's a directive from the FA, the Premier League, and usually the clubs as well, to try and ask the coaches to kind of be a bit more restrained and let the players play and enjoy, and not try and get too worked up about the game. So it is a bit different from that aspect. But with saying that, outside of the academy structure, it's very similar to what happens in India, where the parents, the coaches, managers, and whatever else, they are very, very animated on the side as well.
What do you think this could have as an effect? I know as a Premier League academy, of course, there's a directive from the FA, from the Premier League as well, that what's the why you shouldn't be shouting and screaming at the players and give them that freedom rather than control them from the sidelines. But could you tell us and our audiences as well, what could an impact be for a player, for a little player who's 10 or 11 years old, who's out there just for the love of the game, trying to do the best that he or she can? What do you think the impact is on that child when there is a constant kind of pressure from the outside in terms of controlling the game?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Pressure. I mean, do we need a 10-year-old to have pressure when they're playing football? Something that we want them to enjoy, not just for today, but for the next 20, 30 years. If they're a 10-year-old, we want them to enjoy football. If they're playing under that pressure at 10 years old, are they going to enjoy it? I don't think so. Football's about techniques and decision making. I think quite often if parents and even coaches are shouting and screaming from the side, they're taking away a lot of the decision making away from the player, telling the player what to do, how to do, when to do. So does the player learn? Do they make their own decisions? Not really. So I think, and it could also be contradictory as well. So, the coach might have said they want a certain way of playing, and then the parent could be shouting and screaming something else. And now, again, the player can be confused, and because of the conflicting messages. So for me, there's a number of reasons why you really would like the game to kind of flow without little or no kind of pressure or involvement from the sidelines.
I think the reason I asked that is because parents are incredibly involved with their children's, whether it's academics, whether it's sports, whether it's their child at the end of the day that they want to see blossom into the world's best at some point, and that's the kind of passion that we see. But then, what is it that parents could, what would your advice be to parents? Because at that age, it's very difficult, even for a specialist, for example, to identify whether that player is going to make it or not. But for a parent, right, what is it that you said you want the child to love the sport for a long period of time? So as a parent who is today confused about, okay, will my child make it or not, and that's what is making them, that animated on a match day. What would you advise parents to do in order to develop children on the football side as a parent?
I think first and foremost, you've got to look at football like a school. So I think the same kind of thought that you put into what school your son or daughter goes to, you should use that same thought or same scrutiny as to what football club your son or daughter goes to, because they're going to a place of learning. Now, once you're comfortable with the school, whether that be a football school or academic school, then I think you've got to let the experts do their job. Because what I wouldn't do as a football coach, I wouldn't say to my dentist how to, deal with my teeth, or say to my mechanic how to fix my engine, because that's his expertise, or that's her expertise. So really, you've almost got to then say, okay, I'm at the best school, best football school, best academic school, whatever else it is. And then you've got to really allow the experts to do their job. That's not to say that you're not going to be involved. You're going to be supportive, and you're going to be encouraging, and you're going to support what, the ethos of the club and the directive of the club and whatever else, and support your son or daughter 100%. But like I said, for me, it's around, trusting, the coaches, trusting the club that you've, asked your son or daughter to play for, and letting the experts get on with it.
So true, so true. I mean, if this message reaches home, and everyone, I think the dentist and the car mechanic example that you gave is just so perfect. If people can start looking at football in the same way, but it's just, for some reason, football's never looked at that way.
No, unfortunately, everyone's an expert in football.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And I'm saying that obviously tongue in cheek, but that's just the nature of it.
Yeah. So, Ose, how has your relationship in the past been with parents at the academies that you have worked at? Have you had hard parents, or when you do have such kind of parents as well? What can you take us through some examples that you have, maybe tough situations that you have maybe come out of, or maybe explain to the parents as well? Because, like you said, they will be involved, right? And they want to be involved.
Yeah.
So how do you have you managed this in the past, this kind of a situation?
Yeah, and you want them to be involved, because one thing for sure, like I said to you before, as a coach, you need to know the person before you know the player. The person who knows the person most is the parent. Yeah. So 100% you need to have a relationship with the parent. And there's times when, I've been in positions where the parent could be maybe, overexcited, over-aggressive, just too loud, too boisterous on the side or whatever else. But it's just a simple conversation. And, it's getting them to understand that you're there to maximize their son or daughter's development. And once they understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, and what they're doing might be a negative influence, then they're quite happy. Because ultimately what they're doing is because they want the best for their child. And that's 100%, everyone wants the best for their child. But it's just maybe sometimes they might be a little bit misguided. And that's quite often, in my previous roles, that would be my job to just explain, the different way of doing things and the reason why it might be best if you kind of step back a little bit, still be supportive, but just be a little bit more measured.
Okay. I've actually seen a few examples at our league where parents, I've seen them walk up to the coaches and question playing time. I think that's one of the topics that's usually discussed, where my child did not get enough playing time, or only the best players were in a 7v7 format. Possibly the coach, because he wanted to win, he used only the best 7 players, and the rest 5 or 6 were just on the bench throughout. So these are some of the problems that we see coming up. You as a coach, and of course as Kickstart Academy, what is your how do you deal with playing time for coaches, because for players, because that is important. I mean, at 11 you may be the best, but you may not be the same at 15. So how do you still manage the players who are on the bench, or what's playing time like for you?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've learned, in all the years that I've been involved in football, is, and it hasn't changed, football players, whether they be young or old, they want to play matches. They want to play in games. And if, and an example of that would be if you had 10 players and there was no coach there, and you gave them a ball, they'll organise a match for themselves. That's what they'll do. So no matter what age they are, 9 times out of 10, if you gave them a ball and enough space, they'll somehow organise some kind of game. So they want to play matches. So it is difficult, and it's difficult depending on how many players you've got in the squad and whatever else. So, some clubs will have a kind of directive, will say, each player will play 50% of the games. It might be that, but it just depends. So it depends on the club you go to and the ethos and whatever else. In the UK, once we sign a player, they have to play a certain amount of games. But everywhere is different. But in the UK, in the academy system, once you have a player actually signed, registered to your club, there's a certain amount of games he or she has to play, without a doubt.
I didn't know this. That there's a guarantee. Minimum game time.
Yeah, obviously if they're injured or whatever else, that's different. But there is up until under 16s, I think it is, there's a certain amount of games they have to play. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that would be very interesting if we could implement something like that in India as well, where you have to play. Actually, we could look at doing this in our league, where we kind of make it mandatory for players to for teams to make sure that players are clocking these many minutes compulsorily, irrespective of where you are in the table.
I think so. I think it would be helpful. I mean, if whether that be 50% of the games or 30% of the games, like a minimum amount, which I think it would be helpful. And in that way as well, you might kind of limit the conflict between parents and coaches, because as long as they meet the objective of playing whatever was agreed, then there shouldn't be an argument.
Nice. So Ose, when you look at coaches, I think the next thing I want to discuss about is the coaches that you work with. How do you segregate learning objectives or development objectives for your coaches? What is it that you want your coaches to achieve with the players? And how are you tracking and measuring that? Okay, are they on the right track? Are they, or there is a bit of intervention needed from your end? What's your, how do you look after the coaches?
So a lot of it is subjective. It's not, you can't measure it as such with numbers so much, although there are some kind of measures I do put in place which you can look at numbers, but the majority of it is with my eye. So there's certain aspects of coaching, and I won't go into too much detail, but there's certain aspects of coaching in terms of a way of coaching that I'd want the coaches to coach. So there's two things about coaching. There's what you coach, so the actual training session, but what's more important to me is how you coach, because the what bit is quite easy. You can go online now and you can see thousands of different training sessions. Okay, but one coach can deliver the same training session, and another coach can deliver the same training session, but they'll get two totally different outcomes, and that's based on how. So a lot of what I look at is, and a lot of what I teach is not so much the what they're coaching, because to me that's the easy bit. It's how they coach, how they connect, how they motivate, how they inspire, how they communicate. And they're the bits that I'm really, really keen on. And like I said, the majority of that is based on the eye, and it's subjective. Although, like I said, there are a few bits that I actually record and measure in terms of things like the ball rolling time. So when I talk about ball rolling time in a 60-minute session or a 90-minute session, I would want the ball to be in play for a certain amount of time. It can't be the coach talking for a certain amount of time. So that I do with the watch. I clock, because people sometimes forget how much coaching they do, and when I say coaching, they do how much talking they do and how much standing the players are doing. And really, I want the players to be playing and less talking. So that I do a little bit more objectively, but a lot of the softer stuff, it's with the eye. But yeah, it's important, very important.
Got it. I think one of the things in India, coach education is something that's the importance of coach education has been just getting bigger and bigger over the last decade or so in India.
Yeah.
And a lot of coaches are actively looking to pursue the various levels of coaching, whether that's starting off with a D certificate and then C license, the AFCB diplomas, A, and then Pro finally. That's a pathway that's been set here in India.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on coach education through the courses? What is it that you want the coaches to be kind of extracting from these versus because I've been on coaching courses myself. I've seen the pressure that's there just to pass and get the certificate. It's very heavy on the coaches.
Yeah.
Right? Some of them are, they are under a lot of pressure because their jobs are, let's say, dependent on this. Their promotions are dependent on getting this. So for the coaches who are listening in, what kind of advice would you give them? How should you be looking at coaching courses?
Yeah.
And how should you then be after the courses? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know the quality of the coaching courses out in India, and I would imagine, similar to the UK, there'll be different levels, even within a C license or a D license. A lot of it will depend on the tutor or the instructor who's teaching you, and that's similar to the UK. So, but I think they're important. I think coaching licenses are important, even if it's just for confidence, to say, you've achieved, a landmark or a qualification. But to me, the majority of learning comes after the license. It's similar to a driving license. So you learn to drive. It means you can drive. It doesn't mean you're a good driver. You become a good driver by driving. Similar to coaching, you get your license, you're qualified to coach. It doesn't mean you're a good coach. You become a good coach by coaching. So you learn on the job. You just get the opportunity to do the job by getting the license. Then you get to a stage where you've done all your coaching licenses and you feel, that you're confident and you're ready to coach and develop and whatever else. And then you've got to go beyond that. For me, you've got to go beyond that, because coaching is about teaching. Coaching is about leadership. Coaching is about communication. Coaching is about inspiring. And there's so many aspects and planning. There's so many aspects or facets to coaching that you won't get from a coaching license. Okay. Or you may get it, but you won't get it at the level that you might do if you went away from football. So for example, as a coach, you're a leader, you might go and look at a politician and see how they lead, or you might go to the army and speak to a major and talk about leadership. Coaching is about communication. Are the best communicators coaches? No, the best communicators might be politicians. They might be barristers. So you might go outside of football now to then develop skills that you need to make you a better communicator, leader, teacher, planner, X, Y, Z. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So like I said, I think the coaching courses are good, but I don't think they're the be all and end all. I think what coaches need to do is look at coaching as a profession, look at the different aspects of coaching, and then go to where they feel they can get the expertise away from football.
Absolutely. And I feel like the Kickstart coaches are in such a good position because one, they do, of course, all the coaching licenses, they do and get the knowledge. They come back to Kickstart with that knowledge. But then that's where your role is so important, being that constant mentor for the coaches within the academy itself. It's like being on a coaching course for your entire tenure, right?
Yeah.
It's like that. And I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Having that mentorship kind of figure,
yeah.
Where you can always bounce off ideas. You can always, for example, the ball rolling time. That's also looked at the coaching courses. How often you're looking at seeing the players active on the pitch rather than just standing and listening to instructions. These kind of things, little things, but. Yeah. I think it's so important to have that mentor at the club also.
Yeah.
Where you're connected.
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, it's and I think you got to get to the stage where the coaches act as mentors for each other. So yes, I'm there and I can't watch every training session, but coaches can bounce off each other and be critical of each other. But similar to the players, if you know the players and the players trust you, you can be critical of them and they know you're doing it because you're helping them. And the coaches, if you've got a good relationship with the coaches, you can be critical, but you're not doing it because you don't like the coach, you're doing it because you want to help the coach. And that's the kind of culture that we've created or we're developing at Kickstart, whereby it's not a problem for a coach to say, you know what, you maybe should have done this differently, or they're not going to get defensive and not going to go in their shell and think, oh, why is he talking to me like that? He's talking to me like that because he wants me to be better. Similar to the players, if you get to know the player as a person, they won't feel like he's talking to me like that because he doesn't like me. He feels like I'm talking to me like that because he actually does like me and he wants me to be better. And that's the environment, the culture that we're trying to create and develop at Kickstart.
Nice. Got it. And just the final segment of our podcast, Ose, it's at the beginning you mentioned about this being about the players, right?
Yeah.
You're here for the players. That's what
Yeah.
you tell the coaches. That's what you tell the parents. The players are ultimately why football even exists. They are the ones who play. They're the ones we all, whether it's a league, whether it's a technical director role. Ultimately, it's the players that we're trying to develop. So, a lot of our audiences on the podcast are players who are just dreaming of making it, right? They're making it. They're probably grinding it out in their local setups with their coaches, with their academies, and of course with the dream of making it professional. We know how difficult it is to make it, from thousands and millions of kids into those maybe 400, 500 places that are there in the top clubs in the league in your country. What, with your 30 years of experience being in talent development, right? What would you guide, or how would you advise a child who is dreaming of making it professional? What are the things that they can work on, whether it's at home, whether it's in training, whether it's mindset, whether it's habits? What would you advise to players in general, not just from Kickstart, but in general? How can they make it?
I think I'll tell them to believe they can make it, and if they believe they can make it, they can. But they have to work. It's hard. But it's only hard if you don't enjoy it. And like I said at the start, if you enjoy the game and you really love the game, training's it's enjoyment. You're going to enjoy it. Now, so you want them to do as much as they can and be the best they can be. There's not one aspect I would say they have to work on, because every player is different, and one player might need more on X and another player might need more on Y. So it's the whole thing, but then specifically for a player, that player might need more of whatever that ingredient is. But I think ultimately they've got to get to the stage at the end, and when I say the end, whether they've made it as a professional or not, they've got to get to the stage where they can look in the mirror and they can say they've done their best. That's it. And if they know that they haven't wasted a second and they've done their absolute best, wherever that takes them is where it takes them. But you can't do more than your best.
Got it. I think that's key. That's key in any profession, but yeah, in football even more so, because when you for example, when you compare cricket to football over here, that's the number of and we were talking offline about this as well, how the number of kids that want to make it as cricketers in the country, for example, right? It's huge. The competition is so massive. Same thing is with football as well, although yes, we have the Indian Super League, which is what players are looking to dream, or rather believe, as you say, that they can make it. But yeah, I think it's just that constantly working hard. That's like in any profession. If you don't do that, for the players, I think that's the most important message.
100%.
Ose, it's been an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. We are incredibly excited to see a big, massive brand like Tottenham in Indian football. Already working towards player development over here, and hopefully making Kickstart into a much bigger, much bigger brand than what it already is, and pushing out a lot more players for Indian football. Thank you so much for your time. Firstly,
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we hope to see you at the league, and hopefully see some of your work with the coaches actually being executed at the league as well.
That'd be good. No, definitely, for sure. Thank you. Cheers.